Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Now let us look at the Crusades. Now, as the Arab Empire was expanding, growing in power, as it was expanding its territory as well as spreading Islam with the expansion of its territory, what was happening in Europe? How was Europe or how was the neighboring empire reacting to the expanding Islamic empire? Okay, so let's look at that. Now, something called crusades took place. Okay, now crusades were holy wars, or these were military expeditions which were also known as holy wars, and these were led by Christians in Europe. Okay, in 11th, 12th and 13th centuries for the recovery of Holy Land, that is Palestine, from the Muslims. So we know that the Muslims were taking over the territories which were earlier part of the Roman Empire, right? And it had moved, we know that it had moved from Central Asia to Mediterranean region, to North Africa, to even Spain, right? So as this was happening, the Christians in Europe, they now led crusades, okay, or holy wars. These were wars that were led by the Christians in Europe during the 11th, 12th and 13th centuries against the Muslims, so that they can recover their holy land, the holy land of the Christians, that was Palestine. Okay, and the Christians from Europe who were recruited, who were part of this crusade, who were part of this movement, or who were part of this war, they were called the Crusades. Okay, they were called the Crusades, the military personnel or the knights who fought for a cause, for a great cause, that is war to recover the holy land of the Christians. Now, how did these Christians begin the Crusades? What led them to start such a war, okay, or holy war? The first reason is that in the 11th century, the cultured Arabs of the Near East were overrun by the fierce Muhammadan Seljuk Turks. In Palestine, pilgrims were denied access to the Christian shrines and holy places by these Muslims. Now, when the Muslim rulers or Muslim dynasties, okay, when they took over the Near East part of the Roman Empire in Europe, now, and as they did that, they took over Palestine, they took over Jordan area, right? Now, as they did that, they now stopped the Christians to make pilgrimages, and these pilgrimages were made by Christians to their holy place or their shrines in Palestine, all right? Now, with the control of that area by Muslims, the Muslim leaders did not provide access for the Christians to make those pilgrimages, okay? And the Turks also at the same time threatened to occupy the great Christian bulwark of Constantinople. So Constantinople, as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, also was one of the Christian bulwark, okay? It signified the Christian rule. It was one of the important stronghold of the Roman Empire or the Christian Empire, okay? So this capital city was also threatened by the Turks, okay? The occupation of this capital city was also threatened by the Turks, the Muslims, all right? So when this happened, the Roman emperor appealed to the Pope, all right, the head of the religious head of the empire. So the Pope was appealed or requested by the emperor to help him counter the Muslim rulers, counter the Turks, counter the Seljuks, okay? Now, the Pope took this occasion, okay, took this event as an opportunity to prevent the spread of Muslim and to spread instead Christianity and establish the leadership and establish the authority and power of the bishop or of the Pope in Europe. Okay, so this was a perfect opportunity provided to the Pope to make a decision so that the Roman Empire comes together to fight in their fight to prevent the Muslims from spreading Islam and to spread Christianity instead and reinstate the power and authority of Christians in Europe. Okay. Now, what was the second cause? In 1095, Pope Urban II, the Pope, in an eloquent appeal, asked the Knights of Europe to take up the cross and rid Palestine of the Muslims. For 200 years, Christian Europe sent its knights to Near East to battle with the Mohammedans. So, as a result of this, the Pope now announced all the knights of Europe to come together and recruit themselves in the army in this war, holy war, which was a war that was fought against the Mohammedans, that was fought against the Muslims, and to also rid the Muslims from Palestine. Okay. The third cause, some of the knights went on these expeditions or crusades because they loved to fight or because they hoped to obtain land and riches in the Near East. Some of the rich cities in Italy assisted the crusaders primarily to advance their trade. Now, the Pope had its own intention, right? He took the opportunity to use the crusaders for the spread of Christianity. Now the other participants in this holy war had their own personal intentions. Okay, like for example, some of the crusaders who were participating in this holy war, some of them really wanted to take part in the fight because they loved taking part in the battle. Others hoped that as a result of taking part in these battles, they could loot those areas, they could take the riches found in those areas. Okay, and some people, they supported such wars and supported the army so that this could help in re-establishing their trade relations with the regions lying in that area, like for example Italy with Palestine or the areas in Palestine. Okay, there were countless men who went on crusades because it was a holy war. They were inspired by the thought that they were fighting for Christianity and that any sacrifices made by a crusader would be amply repaid by the wiping away of the sins. Many looked at the crusades as a means of expressing loyalty to the church. But there were others, all right? There were others who seriously considered the holy war as a cause, as one of the way to wipe out the Muslims and to fight for Christianity. Okay? So they believed that by sacrificing their lives, by fighting for the cause of Christianity, their sins would be wiped away, and they would also express how loyal they were to the church, how loyal they were to the Pope. Okay, so such were different causes which led the knights to come and join the war, which led the emperor, which led all the people to support the holy war in their fight against the Muslims and spread of Islam. Okay. So we said that these crusades took place between the 11th, 12th and 13th centuries. All right, so let us look at them briefly. So the first crusade took place in 1096 AD. Now, various circumstances, but primarily the personality of Pope Urban II brought about the first crusade. Okay, so it was because of Pope Urban II which led or which paved the way for the first crusade. Okay, the first crusade began in the year 1098 AD. When two bands of several thousand men started out in the spring, crossed Germany, Hungary, Bulgaria, and finally reached Constantinople. Upon their arrival in Constantinople, the emperor requested the crusaders to remain within the city until the main body should reach there. When they became unruly, however, they had them he had them transported across the straits to Asia Minor, where they were promptly killed by the Turks. Now, the first crusade took place when thousands of men were sent across Germany, Hungary, Bulgaria to Constantinople. There, these crusaders were asked to wait, but then there were a lot of factions within the crusaders. So the emperor asked them to cross and go into Asia Minor. They were sent to Asia Minor, okay, the area of the Turks. And as they arrived there, they were attacked by the Turks, and all of them were killed there. All right. Now another group of crusaders, they marched through northern Italy. Okay. Still another army crossed the Adriatic from Italy to Greece. They crossed from Italy to Greece. At length, they all met in the city of Constantinople, and one marched through northern Italy to reach Constantinople. Another marched through Italy to Greece, and then reached Constantinople. Okay, they all met in Constantinople. The emperor agreed to give them assistance in return for emperor's help to regain from him the cities that had belonged to the Byzantine Empire. Now the emperor, the Roman emperor, said that he would help these crusaders in their fight against the Muslims if the crusaders also helped the emperor to regain the territories that it lost. Okay. Now the journey through Asia proved to be very dangerous for them. Okay, they had to enter into Asia Minor. Many of the crusaders perished from heat and thirst. Many of them could not adapt to the climate there. But at last, by the end of 1098 AD, the crusaders reached the city of Antioch, which they captured after the siege of 7 months. So these crusaders, despite the heat, despite the difficulties, they captured the city of Antioch. Okay, in 1099 AD, Jerusalem was occupied after the siege, and Jerusalem was also occupied a year later. When the news of the capture of Jerusalem reached Europe, people there were very happy with this news that they celebrated. A flourishing trade as a result of the occupation of Jerusalem and Antioch by the Europeans, the trade flourished between Italy and the countries soon after the end of the First Crusade. Okay, so these are the developments that took place during the First Crusade. Now let's look at the later Crusades. Now the First Crusades covered the years between 1098 AD to 1099 AD. The Second Crusades were declared in 1145 AD. The Third Crusade took place little later in 1189 AD. Now, these crusades resulted from the capture of Jerusalem and the surrounding territory of Saladin, a great Muhammadan statesman called Saladin. Okay. The Third Crusade, though led by most illustrious monarchs of the feudal age, brought no conquest except the island of Cyprus and a few cities on the coast of Syria. Now, the Third Crusade did not lead to capture of more cities or more areas except the island of Cyprus and few cities on the coast of Syria. The Fourth Crusade, which was followed after the Fourth Crusade, which took place after the third one, was directed by the Venetians, who in 1204 AD persuaded a large number of crusaders on their way to Holy Land to deviate from their course and attack Constantinople, which they captured. Now, during the Fourth Crusade, the Crusaders were able to capture Constantinople. Okay, in 1229 AD, the Fifth Crusade began under the leadership of Frederick II, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and King of Sicily. Okay, the Fifth Crusade was led by the Roman Emperor and the King of Sicily. Dissensions among the Muslims enabled him to obtain a very favorable peace treaty with him, giving him the city of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. So as a result of the Fifth crusade, the city of Jerusalem and Bethlehem was taken by the European troops from the Muslims. Okay. But in 1244 AD, the Muslims again seized and captured Jerusalem. Okay, the Christians now once more surrendered the holy city together with Bethlehem to the Muslims. So now the capture of Bethlehem and Jerusalem by the Muslims took place from the hands of the European Christians. Okay. Now the loss of Jerusalem and Bethlehem, okay, from the hands of the Muslims again, it stirred the Christians to make the final attempt to recover the remnants of the kingdom of Jerusalem. This outraged the Christians, and now again they led themselves to the final recapture of the Holy Land or Holy City of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. It was led by King Louis the Ninth of France. The last two crusades were organized by ably commanded. So the last crusade was led and commanded by King Louis the Ninth. Okay, but this did not result in capture of these two cities. Okay. Now, during this last crusade on the way to Palestine, Louis IX died. Okay, in 1291 AD, the only remaining stronghold of Christian also fell before the advancing armies of the Mohammedans. So, at the end of the crusade, the last remaining stronghold of the Christians was also captured by the Muslims. All right. Now, the historians have different opinions about these crusades. Okay, so let us look at their viewpoints on the nature of crusades. Now, the crusades took a terrible toll of human lives, mostly those of the Christians who perished along the way in Balkan Peninsula or in Asia Minor. Now, historians are of the opinion that these crusades led to killing of thousands of lives, especially of the Christians, those knights who took part in this holy war. Okay, so they perished and they died as they moved along the Balkan Peninsula and Asia Minor. Okay. Now, though these crusades, they checked the spread of Islam in the eastern part of Roman Empire, yet this check was only temporary. Okay, although these crusades led by the European Christians were able to prevent the spread of Islam, but this prevention was only temporary. It did not last for more than a couple of years. Okay. In the 14th century, another Turkish tribe, after having adopted Islam, took up the invasions where Seljuk Turks had stopped in the 11th century. So what happened was, even after being able to seize and capture some of the cities like Jerusalem, Bethlehem by the European Christians or Crusaders, again the Muslim rulers after the Seljuk Turks were able to recapture and retake these territories from the Christians. All right. So this check that the European Christians provided for the spread of Islam, for the spread of the territory of this Arab Empire was not permanent. This was temporary and lasted for a brief time. Okay. Now, one of the important outcome of these crusades was the rise of three famous military and semi-militaristic orders composed of noblemen. Okay, so it led to the formation of noblemen, famous military and semi-militaristic orders of noblemen. So they were the Knights of Hospitallers, a sort of Red Cross organization. It was a sort of Red Cross organization. Okay, the second was the Knights of Templars or the Knights of Temple, and the third was the Teutonic Knights. So these were noblemen who were created in order, in military or semi-militaristic order as a result of the Crusades. Okay. Now, these crusades, it led to the growth of chivalry among the people, among the Christians, and provided an immense number of topics for poets and historians to write about. Okay, so they wrote about this militaristic orders that were formed as a result of this crusade. Okay, so innumerable stories, innumerable poems, songs, stories, or histories were written during this period by the knights who took part in the crusades, and also by other writers. And these writings stirred the imaginations of not only those who lived in that time, but also others who read about this particular event. Okay, a sense of chivalry, a sense of the cause, okay, the righteous cause of the war, holy war. These were all shared, or these were all put forth for others, for the readers who read about this event in future. Okay. From the Crusades, the people of Western Europe, they acquired a new outlook upon the Islamic world and a new interest in Oriental civilization. The inhabitants whom the Crusaders found in the Holy Land were for the most part the Arabs, whose level of civilization was far higher than that of the Crusaders from France, England, or Germany. Now, what this crusade did was another very important contact which brought the Europeans with the Arabs together. Okay, now as the Europeans, the Christians, went from France, Germany, England to fight for a cause in these areas in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, they came in contact with the Muslims. They came in contact with their culture, with the society, and they saw that how the standard of civilization, the level of civilization was much higher of these Muslims than that of the Europeans in Germany, France, and England. Okay, so the Crusaders now came to learn about the Islamic world, and it also gave them a sense of interest, or they also now begin to be curious about them. They also started to become interested about the Islamic world and the Arab Empire. Okay. The major result of the crusade was a great expansion in commercial activity, especially in Italy, which had a real trade boom. The crusades opened up both the supply of Oriental goods and the demand for them. The Muslim sea power was defeated in the Mediterranean, and the trade routes to the east were cleared. Close behind the Crusaders followed the merchants. During the Crusades, the Italian cities established firm connections with Oriental supply sources. The returned Crusades, with their tales of Eastern luxuries, advertised the goods which Italy could now offer to Europe. Into Europe came new luxuries such as silk, cotton, jewelry, sugar, and perfumes. Damasks, muslins, glass mirrors, rugs, gloves, incense, and many other goods. These things became popular in Europe as a result of the Crusades. So one of the major things, as we already discussed a little bit, the contact. All right, so this contact resulted in this idea about the Muslim world. Okay, now as a result of this crusade, people began to see what kind of lifestyle, what was the culture, what was the trade, what was the relationship of the Islamic world with the other world. Okay, so that was now understood by the Europeans. All right, now Europeans, as a result of the crusade, also built contact with the areas or parts of the Muslim or parts of the Arab Empire. As a result of this connection, trade began to flourish, say for example between Italy and the western part of the Arab Empire. Okay, so as a result of this trade, what happened now? Luxurious goods, which existed or which were in use in the Arab Empire, now started to arrive in Italy, and from Italy it was now distributed to the whole of Europe. So now European people desired for this expensive or luxurious goods such as perfumes, silks, jewelry, sugar, etc. Okay, so the tales of luxurious items being able to be procured from the Arab Empire into Europe. This excited the people in Europe. This encouraged the merchants to move to the Arab Empire to procure these goods, procure these articles for sale in the market in Europe. So that kind of relationship of trade and commerce was established. Okay. Now let us look at the Arab Empire's system of law, justice, and culture, society, art, architecture. Okay. Now, the legal issues in the Arab Empire, such as personal statuses like marriage, divorce, inheritance, they were all decided by what was written in Sharia. Okay, they were all decided by the laws. So they were all decided by the Sharia. Okay. Now Sharia was adjusted to take into account the customary laws of the various regions as well as the laws of the state on political and social order. We have already learned how Quran became the written constitution of the Arab Empire. From Quran, laws were drawn, laws were written. Okay, so those laws were Sharia, and those laws decided the legal statuses of people. Those decided the laws of the state, the social and political order. Okay, so all kinds of laws were driven were taken from the Quran. Okay, the holy book of Muslims. In most regimes, the rulers or the officials dealt with matters of state security and forwarded only the selected cases to the Qazi. The state appointed the Qazi in each city or locality. He often acted as an arbiter in disputes rather than a strict enforcer of the Sharia. Now, in most of the regimes, okay, the rulers or the officials, they dealt with matters of state security and forwarded only selected cases. Most of the cases were dealt by the officials or the rulers, and only some of them were sent to the Qazi. So Qazi was the judge. Okay, so this judge was appointed by the ruler. Okay, by the ruler in each city or locality. All right. So the judge provided justice, and he also settled disputes. All right, among the people. Now let us look at economy. First, we'll look at agriculture. What was the agriculture like in the Arab Empire? Now, the Muslims made important advances or development in agriculture and industry. Wherever they went, they picked up new plants and new methods of cultivation. We already know that as the Arab rulers were capturing more territories, were expanding their territories, they were learning about those areas. They were learning about new things, new ways. So in the similar manner, in agriculture as well, wherever they went, wherever they captured a new territory, a new kingdom, they picked up new plants which interested them, and they also learned about the new methods of cultivation of these new plants or better ways of cultivation of some crops. Okay, they revived the old canals in Mesopotamia for better irrigation. Okay, they built canals, they renewed some of the old canals. They also used windmills. Okay, they studied how to raise stocks, animals. Okay, especially the horses in Persia. They were very cautious about raising of horses, because horses were very important part of their military, right? On horses, the soldiers often went, or the soldiers rode the horses, and they went to the war. So horses were very important. So they invested themselves to learn about how to take care of horses. All right. They restored large portions of desert lands in North Africa, and they brought back these lands to proper farming. They converted these desert lands to farmlands. Okay, Muslims in Spain, they became famous for the progressive farming methods. So the Muslims in Spain that lived in Spain, they developed progressive ways of farming, better ways of farming, advanced ways of farming. Many new varieties of farm products were introduced there, and they were later taken to Western Europe. Okay. Europe was taught how to grow products such as lemons, strawberries, pomegranates, dates, cotton, sugar, spinach, oranges, apricots, bananas, and peaches. So the whole of Europe actually learned from Spain how to grow these crops, fruits, and other vegetables. Okay. The Muslim farmers also gained knowledge about rice and buckwheat cultivation, and they also, from them, the other European rulers learned about these cultivation methods. Okay. Now, in terms of industry as well, the Muslims were as advanced as they were in agriculture. Okay, their workshops were very well known for high grade textiles. They produced very good quality textiles. Okay, they produce linen, tapestries, jewelry, gold, silver, perfumes, glass, and pottery, as well as leather goods. Okay. Each section of the Muslim world was famous for the excellence of particular products. So each part or each region of the Arab Empire was popular for their own products. Say, for example, the northern part was very good for leather production, or the eastern part was very good for textiles. All right. So that's just an example. So every region had their own specialization in certain products. Okay. In North Africa, there was Morocco leather. So North Africa produced Morocco leather. Baghdad was notable for jewelry and gold production. The city of Mosul, it produced excellent cotton textiles, which was called muslin. Damascus was famous for the production of fine steel weapons and a cloth, okay, a kind of cloth which came to be known as damask. Cordova was famous for its Cordovian leather, and it was from this term Cordovian leather that the English word for shoemaker, which is cardwainer, was adopted. Okay. Now the Muslims, they also learned about paper making process, and this was learned from the Chinese. Okay, they borrowed the knowledge of paper making and they applied it in their own empire. Okay, by 880 they had set up their own paper mill in the city of Baghdad. The process of paper making was introduced in Muslim Spain, and then later it was introduced in Muslim Spain in 1150 AD. Okay. Now, the tremendous progress of Muslim industry naturally stimulated commerce. So we can see that how well they were doing in industry. Okay, so this stimulated or this encouraged commerce. All right, merchants from various trade centers in Muslim world made their way into southern Russia, to India, to China, down the east of east coast of Africa as far as the island of Madagascar. In their trade across the overland routes to China and India, huge caravans were employed, using as many as 4,000 camels in a single expedition. So as a result of the advancement of technology, as a result of advancement, growth in the production of different varieties of products and articles like jewelry, textile, gold, etc., right? Now the traders of the Arab Empire, they had to sell these, right? So to sell these, the merchants and traders, they made their way all across the world. Okay, so they made their way to southern part of Russia. They also reached India, China, Africa, as far as the island of Madagascar. Okay, so as these traders and merchants from Arab Empire traveled to sell their products, they would often go in a group of large animals carrying their goods, carrying the articles along with their the helpers. Okay, so these groups of animals and the helpers along with the articles that they carried to sell in other countries, these were called caravans. So some of these caravans were so large that it consisted of as many as 4,000 camels. Okay, so you can imagine the amount of articles that were being transported to China, to India, and other parts of the world. All right. Now, because of this commercial activities of the Arab Empire and the Arab traders and merchants, the terms such as traffic, tarif, bazaar, caravan, these were words which began to be circulated in the Arab Empire, and as a result of their trade relations, commercial relations with other. They advanced the use of business organizational forms like the partnership and the trade association. Okay, now they began to form these business organizations. They also began to form partnerships between traders, between merchants to carry out the trade and commerce. Okay, so they also began to form trade associations. All right. They also invented many instruments for making the trade and commerce easy, like bill of exchange. Bill of exchange is just like how credit card works. Okay, so you have a small bill which allows you to get the reimbursement or the money for the articles that you have sold, for the articles that you have bought. Okay, so like that they invented such forms of currency or forms of money. All right. Old and new lanes of commerce were laid out, serviced and policed. So the roads, the trade routes were developed, the old ones were renewed, they were repaired, and these routes were properly maintained, and they were also policed so that robberies don't take place, so that while on the journey, the merchants and traders are not robbed by thieves. Okay. Now, alongside the cities, the important cities now began to be developed as an entry port. Okay, so what is an entry port? Entry port are these important cities, okay, where the articles which are produced, they are collected and they are gathered there. Okay, for what? For distribution to other parts of the empire or other parts of the world, where the merchants would take them for selling it to, say, for example, India or Africa or Asia or China. All right. So such entrepôts developed, and these entrepôts were Baghdad, Basra, Aleppo, Alexandria, and Aden. Okay. The Europeans acquired knowledge of compass from the Muslims. Now, as the Muslims were advancing their technologies, as the Muslims were advancing instruments and equipments for the development and growth of their commerce and trade. Now, all their equipments, all their advancements, all right, they were used or they influenced the European knowledge. They influenced the Europeans to also develop similar kind of instrument, similar kind of advancement in technologies. Okay, so for example, the Muslims used compass. Now this knowledge of the use of compass was borrowed by the Europeans and they began to use it. Okay, stories of faraway places abounding in gold, silver, silks, and spices were brought back by the Muslim traders, explorers, and travelers, circulated by the word of mouth through Europe. Now, these Muslim traders, merchants, the Arab merchants, as they went on with their products to trade them in the rest of the world, as they returned, they came back with stories of how some countries, some kingdoms were rich in spices, in gold, silver, in silks, in textile, etc. Okay. So their stories inspired explorers. Their stories inspired more traders and merchants from not only the Arab Empire but Europe as well. All these stories were circulated among the people in Europe, in Central Asia. Okay, and these stories inspired more and more travelers, more explorers, more traders to also start their journey and go to other far distant places. All right. Basra was a very beautiful city in the empire. Their two building complexes at the heart of the city was constructed. Okay, these complexes, they radiated cultural and economic power of the Arab Empire. They were a congregational mosque. So one of the buildings was a masjid and the other was a marketplace. Okay, now the marketplace had shops in a row and merchants' lodgings. Okay, lodge or rooms where the merchants lived, and also a small space or office space for the money changer. Okay, the person who was in charge of changing the money or giving out the credit or exchanging certain currencies. All right, so these buildings, it showcased how Basra was one of the important entry port and how trade and commerce was flourishing in the Arab Empire and how wealthy and how powerful the Arab Empire was growing. Okay. Now let's look at the religious thought. The religious and social experiences of the Muslims deepened when they came in contact with the other people. The Muslim community began to reflect on itself and issues related to God and the world. Now, as these Arab rulers conquered more and more territories and they came in contact with other people, they began to reflect on themselves, and as they reflect, they began to think of their relationship with God, their relationship with people, and their relationship with the world. So they became religiously conscious. Okay, conscious about their religion, conscious about their faith. Okay. Now, there were religious scholars like ulema. Okay, they were called ulema. They studied the Quran, the holy book of the Muslims, and they derived information and knowledge from it. Okay, and with the knowledge that they gained, they then helped in the formulation of rules and regulations for the ruler, for the people. Okay, and the followers of Islam. All right. And these rules and regulations which were formed, they were to replicate the teachings or behaviors of Prophet Muhammad. Okay, how Prophet Muhammad lived, what were his teachings. So on the basis of all that principles and teachings, the knowledge was derived in such a way that rules and regulations were formulated for the people. Okay. So these ulemas, they said that by following these rules and regulations, it was the only way to know the will of God and to provide guidance in this world. So the knowledge of the Quran, it basically decided everything. Okay, it was basically a way to provide guidance to the people and also to know the will of the God, what God wants out of you. Okay, from your service, all those. All right. The Muslim scholars in the medieval times devoted themselves to writing tafsir and documenting Muhammad's authentic hadith. Some scholars, ulema, prepared a body of laws or sharia to govern the relationship of Muslims with God through rituals and with the rest of the humanity through social affairs. In framing Islamic law, the jurists also made use of reasoning. The differences in the interpretation of the sources and methods of jurisprudence led to the formation of four schools of laws. Okay? In the 8th and the 9th centuries. Now, the scholars during this period, they read Quran, but the interpretation that they did, what are the knowledges that they were getting and what they were writing about, that varied. That was different. Some scholars, they were only concentrating or they only focused to get the such knowledge from Quran which would lead to the formulation of rules and regulations for the people. Some scholars read the Quran so that they could write about Prophet Muhammad and his teachings. Okay, some some read Quran. Some scholars read Quran to get the knowledge of various methods of how justice would be provided. Okay, so these kind of various interpretation of Quran led to formation of four schools. Okay, four schools in the 8th and 9th centuries. All right, and these schools were called Maliki, Hanafi, Hanafi, Shafi, and Hanbali. Okay. So these were the four different schools, and the rulers ruled according to the knowledge that they acquired from these four schools.